Afternoon, Tim. How are you?
Afternoon, Shabbar. I'm good. Yeah, how are you?
I'm very well. The sun is shining. It feels very warm at the
Beautiful.
moment, so all is well.
Mm-hmm.
Today's conversation, I'm bringing something in.
Mm-hmm.
So this is for those that have listened already. This might be sort of quite reminiscent of the sock episode, I feel. So shall I just set a little bit of the scene, and then you?
Let me just, before you do, those who don't know what you mean when you say the talk episode, I think what you mean is you're going to share something more like a personal thing that's coming up for you around money. And we're going to do a bit of light reflection, maybe even light coaching around it. So it's a bit more like a kind of personal case study rather than talking more generally. Although we might go general when we find out what's going on here. Is that what you meant for people
Yeah,
listening?
that is, yeah, it's going to be a bit more closer to home for me. So yeah, like with all of these, where I open up feeling a little bit nervous, just because when you reflect back on it, it's like, oh crikey, I'm being really silly. But we'll get into it. I'll
Mhm.
explain.
Okay.
So as part of my Amex credit card that I recently signed up for, I got this nice new travel voucher for £200, which I could spend on the Amex travel website. So this was really nice. And I thought, wow, Naz's birthday is coming up. And wouldn't it be great if I just used this voucher for a night away? And I logged onto the website, started looking at a few hotels, noted down that I didn't want to sort of venture too far away from London because it's only for one night, so I don't want to spend a lot of time in the car. Started looking at hotels and the prices, etc. And I very quickly noticed that I was getting into a bit of a spiral around trying to maximize the value of the voucher. And I became paralyzed around choosing a hotel based on the requirements that I wanted, which was almost like the best hotel that I could find for £200. But I also wanted to make sure that, well, it included breakfast. And if I could get like breakfast and dinner, that would be even better. And I was getting frustrated when the value was coming out at like £150 for a night, because then I felt like, oh, I'm wasting £50 worth of the voucher, because you can't you can't carry forward any of the unused balance. It's like a one voucher, you use it for one transaction. And so it was only, I think, around the third night of me sort of spending hours looking at the same hotels, the same sort of things coming up, that I thought, this is absolutely insane. What are you doing? And then it just dawned upon me that something's going on here.
Mm.
Let me bring it in and speak to Tim, because this is the problem of
Mm.
money, and this definitely feels
Mm.
like a problem of money topic.
Great. Thank you for bringing it in. Like, we don't know where this is going to go. We'll see. Few things to say to start with. Yeah, you said, when you were starting, you feel a bit nervous, or is it silly? So, whether anyone listening can relate to this or not, this example, everyone will relate to having some funny money thing they do that if they can look at it in the clear light of day, they might go, oh, that's a bit silly, or I feel a bit nervous sharing that. So for you, it's about maximizing this voucher. Other people, it might be spending stuff really freely that they know they don't need, or having three of something that they don't need. For others, it's not even being able to look at their money. I was talking to someone recently who has financial worries, and they're paying massively more than they need to for all sorts of monthly subscriptions, but they've been unable to really look at it. So the point is that if we're honest, all of us have little money quirks, peccadillos, strange things. And a great sign that we're getting close to something where we can actually learn something psychological about ourselves, something where we can actually learn something valuable, is precisely that moment where we start to feel a bit awkward, a bit vulnerable, a bit silly.
So I'm in the
So
right
it's,
place.
yeah, it's great that you bring it. The fact that we feel awkward and silly is because one part of us knows, I don't need to be doing this pattern. This doesn't make sense. This isn't in the language of the money work, this doesn't really support my life. We've talked in many episodes about life path and money path. So one part of my being says, well, this doesn't support my life, being up 3 nights in a row or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was sort of, after dinner, sitting down on my laptop. I could have been doing anything else, but then I feel like I'm sort of,
Anything else in the world I
but
could have been.
I'm binging on the Amex travel website, looking at the same hotels and just comparing prices and jotting things down. It feels, at first it felt fun, and then it became a bit kind of obsessive.
Yeah, exactly. We get obsessed with something. And again, before we dive into the particular thing, because I want this to be relevant for anyone with any sort of strange money story, you said, well, I could have been doing anything. I could have been out in the garden, could have gone for a walk, could be meditating or praying, could be hanging out with my children. It's your life. And what you're doing is spending the time scrolling through websites. I'm not making that bad, but it's the moment where you go, hang on a minute, what am I doing? That's where there's some investigation. So thank you for bringing it. How many hours have you spent so far on the
Oh,
website?
it's done. I made an executive decision and I booked something, which was
Good.
when I clocked that this is becoming unhelpful behavior. It was almost like you're outdoing the fun, or the time and the investment and the stress you're putting yourself under to just try and maximize this thing
Yes.
is outweighing the fun and the pleasure of actually going away. And that's when I
Great.
thought, right, it doesn't matter what I do in the grand scheme of things, 50 quid here or there, or whatever it was, whatever I was trying to analyze in my head, doesn't really matter. We're going to have a great time. Naz will appreciate wherever we go anyway, so don't worry about that. And you're not going to look back at this in 3 months' time anyway and think it was a bad move, etc. So just
Right.
get on with
I
it.
left £15.50 on my voucher.
Exactly. Yeah,
Days.
exactly. So I was just like, you're going to book something now. It's funny though, I did, because obviously all of these things are now refundable, right? Every sort of hotel you book is like free cancellation. So I kind of had to give myself permission that if you suddenly feel really, really like, oh, this was the worst thing ever, that you've got permission to change it. And it's been a week and I haven't, so.
Good. So what I can hear in that process, and other people who've listened to previous episodes where you shared other things about your own money patterns and your own what we call detective work, I can hear both stories operating, and I can hear you catching your old, more habitual but less helpful story. Maximize value. We're going to come on to what value is shortly. But the old story is something like, right, I need to eke every single penny out of this voucher, and I don't want to be taken advantage of or get a bad deal. I need to make the right deal. And it's all quite tight. Even as I say it, I'm kind of quite rigid. It sounds like you began in a habitual, familiar place that's driven by something we can explore, and I know you have explored, and that you manage to kind of catch it eventually and go, ooh, I know this way of being around money. I know this way of operating. This is very familiar to me. It's driven by something more or less clear. But I don't have to do it this way. And actually, I'm spending a lot of time, and you said it's ruining the fun or damaging the fun. So that's great, because in the moment of enacting a familiar but not very happy, healthy money pattern, you caught it, and then you said, right, I'm going to do something different. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to book something that looks good. It's about the memory and the experience. So tell me if this is right, but it sounds like you managed to kind of switch your money style from one to the other at a certain point.
I did switch, but I feel like in this situation, it was almost like I wore myself down to such an extent that I had no option but to just cut the cord and do it. So, yeah, I would have liked to have come back and said, yeah, I had this pattern, I realized it, and I stopped it. But I was so far down this sort of rabbit hole, I almost had to concede that this is getting beyond, this is
That's
a
good.
bit of a joke. And so yeah, in the end I did, but I think it was more from from a war of attrition rather than a sense of, oh yeah, this is not a helpful behaviour. It was just like, oh, I just need to get this out of the way and done because this is just, ruining everything.
Well, what I'd like to say is very often with very familiar ego patterns of any kind, money or relationship or the way we treat our own bodies or our attitudes to work, very often the human experience is we change when we get ground down, worn out, and really reach the limits of, oh, how much suffering is in this pattern. Most people in most things, so we're talking psychology and human development here, not just money. Normally, we have to kind of grind ourselves down or hit the weariness or the pain or the futility of it before we change. The good news is, at least you did that, because often we just stay with the grind and the weariness. And the other good news is, although to start with, we have to go to the place of suffering and pain and being ground down and exhausted, the more we do that, the more capacity we have to change before we reach there. So maybe next time you get a voucher or have some money for a holiday, maybe next time you have that experience of moving from one story and you only do 2 nights.
Yeah.
Maybe next time you do 1 night. Then maybe the next time you go, you know what? I know my pattern and I'm going to set a timer and I'm going to give myself 60 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever. And I'm going to book something at the end of that and it will be fine. And then I'm going to carry on with this, although we're jumping a bit to the end. Then when you realize you can book in 45 minutes and still have a great time, or one day maybe you spend 3 hours and the hotel's not great, then you start to realize there is very little relationship really between how obsessive I am about choosing the thing and the actual experience I have, which you and I talked about a little bit with the episode about you having a New Year's break with your wife and walking it and realizing actually the real experience is it's an emergent thing. It's about the attitude and the connection and various unknowables. And then just to offer you a final step, then we can get into something I think you and I could have a whole episode on, which is having fun deliberately playing with a different money style. Maybe next time you go, right, who do I know who's really impulsive? Who do I know that just is really impulsive and they'll just go for a picture of a hotel that they really like? I'm going to do that. I'm going to skim through all the photos, all the hotels, and the one that just looks exciting, I'm going to book. How does that make you feel when I say
I quite
that?
like the idea of doing that, just for a bit of a change. I'm quite open to it. Whereas I think
Right.
maybe 6 months ago, before recording these, I might have. Oh no, you couldn't possibly do that. I do have a question. I don't know whether you're sort of going to come on to this. I did want to sort of try and relate this. Hopefully, people are listening and have got value from our conversations. So, just when you said pattern, and I know that in the beginning of these conversations, we talked about sort of the 3 patterns.
Yes.
I don't know. Is there any link between this pattern and those patterns? I mean, we haven't sort of talked about the pattern in this particular episode that I was sort of demonstrating, but obviously we've got those 3 core patterns. Just in case there's anyone sort of listening for the first time, could we do a quick 2-minute recap of those patterns?
I'll do it in 1 minute.
Yeah, go for it.
And if they're interested, we can find the episode where I think there's a couple of episodes where we go into much more depth.
Episodes sort of 2, 3, and 4 go into the patterns.
Right. Yeah, so if you haven't heard those and you're interested, definitely listen to those because they're helpful. Fundamentally, we're saying we unconsciously entangle, or the psychological term project, we tangle up feelings and emotions and human qualities with money that don't really belong with money. So the short version is this: if I have unconsciously tangled up a load of stuff that I think is good, power, success, status, freedom, opportunity, security, etc., if I project that onto money, then obviously I want those qualities near me. Actually, psychologically, I'm saying I'm not in touch with those qualities in myself. I think they're in money. So I'm doing a gesture here. I'm going to grab money because I think it brings me good qualities. And then when I have it, I don't find it easy to let go of it because I think positive human qualities that actually are nothing to do with money, I mistakenly think they are in money. The opposite, if I unconsciously entangle a load of qualities that I believe are negative, deep down they're not negative, but I believe they are, like selfishness, greedy, materialist, unfair, etc., then of course, psychologically, if I associate that with money and I don't realize I'm doing it, my gesture will be to push it away, to push it away. That might look like spending it when I don't need to, not being able to ask for money, not invoicing, not keeping track of money, feeling very awkward if someone gives me something. It's a pushing away gesture. And the third one is where we do a bit of both because we have both entanglements, both projections going. And that's a bit complicated. People need to listen back, I think, to the episode. So let me ask you, of those three gestures, and I know you know them, when Shabba is no longer having fun, because it's really important to say, if what you wanted to do and your way of getting excited about a lovely holiday was to go, you know what, I'm so excited about this. And it's so much fun for me to find a great hotel for me and my wife. I'm going to sit down with a lovely cup of tea. And what I really want to do is spend an hour. I love reading about hotels. No problem, because it's bringing you life as you do it. It's not uptight. It's not neurotic. It's like, oh, I love looking at hotels. I love discovering areas. It's great. Then spend hours doing it, because why not? But I'm assuming it may have started like that, but it wasn't like that.
It starts like that, and I do genuinely love
Yes.
researching stuff. It could be anything. You could give me anything on the planet to start. The researching and the critiquing is what I love. As soon as money enters to the equation, it just gets
right
difficult.
So that sign,
parting with money for it, because then there's a load of stuff that starts creeping in. So if you just, I'm great when it's other people's money. So if I'm booking a hotel for, let's say, my parent, pardon? Yeah, if you were saying, Shabba, can you find me a nice hotel in this part? I would love to go research, give you the prices, give you the pros and cons of each, the facilities, like the things you could do. I would love to do that task. As soon as then it would be like me having to part money with choosing, something happens.
So let me ask you a question. Of those three movements, a grabbing and holding, a pushing away and getting rid of, or a kind of bit of both, what do you think's going on when it suddenly becomes heavy because it's your money you're about to spend?
Well, okay, yeah. So I've been given this £200 voucher, so that was really nice in the first instance. So I kind of it's money. That was okay. It's come in, but now having to spend it is now the difficult bit, because it's like, okay, I've got this voucher. Now spending it in the right way and to maximize it is the sort of the conundrum. How do I get the best bang for my buck from this money? So now it's a case of not wanting to part with it until I'm absolutely certain that I'm spending it in the right way.
So it's a holding on, isn't it? In terms of these archetypal money movements, when I get given the free voucher, that's not a problem.
Happy days.
Right? I like it coming to me in this case, but now I've got it, even though it wasn't my money a second ago until I clicked on the button. It wasn't mine. In fact, it's not even money. It's just some button. But I feel suddenly there's a holding on. And for people just listening to the audio, when Shabba was talking, he had a little hand just moving inwards, and then it got a little bit tight. It's like a slightly tight holding on gesture. So that suggests you are putting something positive onto the money or the having money, but we need to go a step further, because although we're talking about archetypal movements, each person is unique. So Shabba, you have talked a lot about maximizing something. It wasn't spending it, you were saying, and this is where I'm listening to your language, and each of us have our very own unique stiff points or little blocks, and it's often revealed in our language. You talked a lot about, I need to maximize. So tell me about maximizing and why that's so important, and also about what's the problem if I don't maximize.
Yeah, and this is where it becomes a lot easier for me now, having spent so much time with you during the course of these conversations. So there is some sort of inherent belief that being efficient, maximizing productivity, all of these sorts of things
Mm.
are a measure of how good you are. Okay.
As a person, as
Yeah,
a
I think as a man, as a person, I just associate these are good traits. These are good qualities to have in the world. Being efficient, maximizing resources, all of this all of this language which has been fed in. We've spoken about the sort of like the modern industrial complex and all of these things. These are
Mm,
the messages that I've adopted. And again,
mm,
in my work, maximizing returns for clients and
mm,
delivering on that. So,
mm,
but this is my worldview, sort of shaped around this idea of like you've always got to be as efficient as possible. And I think also on the flip side, there's also this mindset of money is scarce,
mm,
and therefore you've got to be especially careful
mm,
and getting your bang for your buck. Because I don't, although I'm changing that, I do feel a bit of a scarce mindset when it comes to money. And therefore,
mm,
when it comes, it's like, or will it come again? There is this sort of, and I don't think it's as strong as the other side, which I just said, but it's definitely there. When the voucher comes, if I don't maximize the voucher, I think the
mm.
message I'm giving myself is that I'm a bit foolish because I haven't taken advantage of what's on offer.
So,
And just
yeah,
to just say, so I'm foolish for not maximizing the offer, and then I'll have to spend maybe more from my own pocket, or if I don't get it right, and I don't mind choosing something which is more than the value of the voucher and top it up with my own money, because that would be perfectly okay, but it's got to be the right deal, kind of thing.
right deal.
Yeah,
So, okay, a few things to say generally for people listening. If you're listening, you can probably hear Shabba hone in on an area and then see a couple of related areas. You're already making associations because you've done quite a lot of this work. We all have certain areas where it's easier for us to get stuck or we get drawn back habitually. All of us have that. So when you're doing this work, you start to get to know what I call my own money dance. And that's why, we could always be very respectful of our own money dance and other people's. We don't need to judge it. We don't need to feel bad because if you didn't have this money dance, you got another one. It's about consciousness. You've talked about maximizing and being efficient is a sign of kind of being a good man, a successful man.
yeah, successful. I think just and also maybe just throwing the word sort of just in like intelligent,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
about intelligence, and I'm not talking about like academic. I'm talking about being maybe a bit more streetwise.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So we can work with this in many ways. There's something about efficiency and maximizing, something about being successful, intelligent. One thing we can do is I can offer some reflections. Shaba, is it intelligent that you spent 6 hours on an American Express website for the sake of possibly 20 to £50? Is that an intelligent use of your time?
Absolutely not. And in fact, I think that's what snapped me out of it, because I was like, well, if my hourly rate is whatever, let's say 150, £200 an hour, right? That's what I would like imagine myself to be charging
Yeah.
for stuff, right? And I'm looking at like maximizing, right, the hotel between 150 to £200. And if what am I losing out? It's like pounds, like 20, 30 quid, 40 quid, whatever it is. The amount of time I'm spending, it just doesn't make sense. And that,
Well, it's about, I want to caveat by saying there's no part of me that really thinks we should evaluate things purely through an hourly rate, but it's a good way of challenging our own beliefs
yeah,
when we do funny things like this. So
yeah,
you were basically charging about £5 an hour for your own research time there, or paying yourself.
yeah. And I know, and like you said, when you enjoy it and it's something that you want to do as a pastime, as a leisure activity, you don't put but it's when it became like, oh, this is the third night in a row that I'm going back and visiting the same stuff and I'm clicking onto the same pages. Like, what am I doing here? Then I was like, okay, You need to make a break. And it was that financial calculation thing in my head that kind of stopped me in my tracks, I think.
So what we start to see is the paradoxes that happen when we're driven by our unconscious entanglements with money. What do I mean? Shabba is spending 6 hours, not fun, pleasurable hours, but slightly uptight, neurotic hours. Why is he doing it? To get the best deal, because that will show he's intelligent. A bit of him unconsciously worries he might not be intelligent in this regard, or might not be savvy or streetwise. So unconsciously, he's trying to prove that he is by spending 6 hours getting the best deal. But when you actually look at it consciously and say, Shabba, is it savvy and intelligent that you spent 6 hours? The answer is,
it's a big fat no. And it's just so funny to hear you say those words back. I mean, if anyone's watching the video, I think I've been chuckling away because it just seems so ludicrous when you shine that light of consciousness on these conversations. It's quite nice just to sit back and chuckle.
And the humour is great, because often when we start this work, I take you back to what you said at the beginning of this. I feel a bit silly, a bit nervous. Money is a taboo. So again, anyone listening, you may have a very different pattern. You may not relate to Shabba's story, but you will relate to it. It feels very nervy, taboo, edgy talking about it. When you've done enough of this work like Shabba has, it's not that suddenly all your sense of problem of money is fully resolved, but at least you can have a sense of humor. And at least you have more fluidity to go, God, I really could do it differently. It doesn't have to be like this. So the fact that you're grinning when I say it is in itself very positive, because it adds to more fluidity. Let me ask you another question. Yeah. Come back to it. Shabba is spending 6 hours because he worries that if he doesn't maximize his value, maybe he leaves 30 quid on the table on the website or something, or maybe he doesn't book breakfast when he could have booked breakfast. Unconsciously, he's driven to do that because he doesn't want to look foolish. You don't want to look foolish. And someone who doesn't maximize money or use it efficiency or make, quote, the right decision is a fool. Let me ask you, Shabba, what's the word for someone who spends 6 hours on the internet trying to find the best deal at a value of roughly £4 or £5 an hour to them?
Fool.
A fool. With no judgment.
Yeah.
We're not saying it critically or judgment, but the very thing I'm trying to prove I'm not, when I'm unconsciously driven because it's tied up with money, often I end up being like that anyway.
Yeah. But interestingly, the saying of the word fool, like I know we often talk about, how does that felt like a bit of a gut punch.
Well, when I said it just then.
When you said, what is someone who spends 6 hours at a value of £5? And when I said the word fool, I felt a little bit of that feels a bit weighty.
So in general terms, any time I have unconscious materials, what we're saying is we have some part of us, some part of our own psyche, that instead of being fully in touch with and seeing that is me and knowing it to be me, my foolishness, my intelligence, my security, my vulnerability, these are all different facets of being a human being. And simply by being a human, we do get to experience them all and use them all. And they can all be really useful. And you might say, well, how's being a fool useful? Go and look at a Shakespeare play. The fool is often the one who tells the truth, who has the freedom to speak truth to power, who doesn't take things too seriously, who has a childlike enjoyment. So all of these qualities, even the ones where our ego psychology thinks, oh, that's not me, I don't like that, all of them deep down can be wonderful. We tie them up with money, and unconsciously that leads to our money dance. And what we're doing here is we're uncovering one area for you. And so, yeah, I really hear that felt like a little gut punch. So the thing to know, and you can say this out loud if you like to, or because the technique you can say inwardly, is not just I'm a fool, but to know it's really okay to be a fool. Really okay. Like, we're humans. We're all foolish. All of us are foolish. Look at how we spend our time. Look at the decisions we make. Look at how often we don't do the really important things. Look at how many of us are chasing money and ignoring our souls or our hearts or nature or the people we love, right? We are all foolish. The question is, do we get to be consciously foolish and use all of the wonderful qualities of the fool, of being carefree and making mistakes and saying whatever we think and not worrying too much? There's so much life-giving value in being a fool. Or do we think, no, I don't want to be a fool. It's not okay to be a fool, but we're still fools. But then I get caught, and that might show up in
Yeah.
my money, trying to not to be a fool. So the thing you can say out loud or inwardly is, I'm a fool and it's really okay.
Yeah.
And see
Well,
if that's,
I can give it a go. Yeah, I'll give it a
yeah.
go. I'm a fool and it's really okay.
And breathe. This is where you come back to your body and you notice if that gut punch, if there's any softening or
Yeah,
release.
no, it's absolutely, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I think your little precursor and me just digesting it, and whilst I know this from the work that we've done, it's like vitamin C, right? You've got to constantly be topping it up,
Yeah.
and reminded of these messages, because it's just so easy to forget. The next holiday trip that comes along, I may reenact the same pattern, but what I'm hoping is that when people engage with this work and they become more conscious, that window of catching yourself maybe gets smaller. So instead of it being, like you said, 3 nights, maybe it shortens to 2, and you catch yourself earlier, because like you said, we're all carrying out these sort of dances. And so, yeah, for me, that really worked, and that gut punch kind of just disappeared when I.
Great. And again, you can move quite quickly because you know the process. I often say there are 3 stages to really living into a new story of money. The big vision would be, wouldn't it be wonderful for society to really live into a new money story? And a money story that, instead of being based around chasing numbers personally and as a country, and instead of this very strange idea that if the number is right, somehow all is good in the kingdom or in the society or in my household or in my soul. It's a strange idea. A new money story says, no, we put what's truly life-giving at the center, what really brings health, vitality, creativity, whatever people really want. And we organize money around that. And of course, the way we start is by trying to realign that in our own lives. And we start by these apparently small but significant things, like, oh, I just spent 6 hours doing this. Was that really where my life wants to be centered? Or was I pulled into a figure out the numbers and maximize them logic that didn't feel good and didn't support my life? So we start on this personal, individual, and often a small event scale. But the big picture is, what would it be like if collectively we really shifted that gravitational center for political decisions, economic decisions, education decisions, work decisions? This becomes very radical, very powerful. The way we do this is, I think there are 3 stages. First, before we've listened to the podcast, before we've thought about this, we just look at the world and we think, well, money is as I think it is. Of course I have to maximize, or of course this would be foolish, or of course this would make me reckless, or of course this will give me security. We just think the world, the economy is as we see it. We don't realize how much we're projecting, how much unconscious energy and parts of our psyche are part of this whole system. The next, which you and I do quite a lot of in this podcast, is we go, maybe it's not as simple as that. Maybe I don't need to do this pattern. Maybe I could do a different pattern. Maybe I really could change my job or spend my money or ask for what I want. Or that we call the detective work. I know you know this, I'm recapping. And the detective work is where I decide to get really interested in my money dance and all of these funny things I do, and what might be going on at a deeper level. So today, your detective work was, yeah, Tim, it's about maximizing. And I think if I don't maximizing, I'm not intelligent, I'm a fool. And it led us into a very particular area. And then the third step, which we've done less of on the podcast, maybe we'll start to do more. And people can do that on the workshops I run. And there's many opportunities to learn more about this, is when you say, I am a fool and it's okay. And you feel in your body something relief. release, like some part of you comes back. And also, we didn't do it today. You could do it afterwards, but I am intelligent with and without booking the first hotel that I like. Or I
Yeah.
am intelligent whether I leave money in my
Yeah.
voucher or not.
Yeah. With or without maximizing.
Yeah, with and without
Yeah.
maximizing.
Yeah.
So it's
And
those
that's
three
important.
levels of we think it's as we think it is, we get really curious, and then eventually we see, no, whatever I've tied up with this money decision or this money behavior, it is actually and has always been part of me. I just forgot.
Yeah. No, great for touching on that. But the wider, obviously, we've got the individual level, but then we've got the sort of, as you branch out, and you've got the sort of the wider societal um, issue at hand with how this work sort of shows up, right? And I think that's another episode in itself, just looking at how we're just tied into this sort of mindset of the numbers, dictate policy, when is that really the way it should be? And in certain places it should be, and in certain places I think it needs to be questioned. But that's a whole show. I know we're sort of wrapping up. The other side of the story that I presented today, and I think this might be a separate one. There was that element of scarcity,
Yeah,
and I'm just bringing it up because that does feel like, for me, and a lot of the conversations that I've had with people, is quite a powerful part
yeah,
of the dance. So I know we concentrated more on the sort of like the maximizing the efficiency and not being a fool, but there was also this part of not wanting to have to then spend out of my own pocket when I was given this opportunity. And that is tied in with the maximizing, but
yeah.
there was this, oh, if I'm going to pay, and it has to be value for money, but coming at it from a different angle, if that makes sense.
It does. I think we should have a part two,
Yeah.
and we can continue the conversation. We can talk about scarcity, and maybe I don't think we've talked about scarcity and abundance on the podcast yet. I know you and I have had some good conversations about it. The other thing I hear you talk about, which I've written down more, is the thing you want to maximize. So we focused on I want to maximize. Okay, Shabba, what do you want to maximize? There are many things I could maximize in my life. Tim, I want to maximize value, the value. Now, that term is doing a lot of work if we just stay with it maybe for 2 or 3 minutes today. Because what do you mean by value? And what is a money-centered idea of value? And what is a life-centered idea of value? So what are you trying to maximize? What is value?
I think that question, as soon as I knew where you were going, inside I was thinking, shit, I don't even think I know. Intuitive, as having to reflect on it, yeah, I'm like, I don't think I know what don't know what to maximize. I think that's going to need a little bit of
Okay.
discovery myself. That's the beauty of this, because as much as I thought I'd kind of pieced together the investigative work around the
Yeah.
maximizing, then suddenly something crops up and it's like, what am I trying to, I can't even, crikey, right, okay, there's
Well,
definitely work to be done there.
I think we can do another episode because
Yeah.
this word value carries a lot of work in this conversation, but also I'm thinking in the world, people talk about value for money and
Yeah.
am I adding value to this business or this job? It's like, well, what are you talking about? Are you talking about numbers? Are you talking about, what about somebody who, I don't know, their figures aren't great, but they're incredibly great person to be around and they motivate everyone and everyone's happy to see them. And is that value? So it's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
I think let's talk about what are we really trying to maximize, and that links into the societal piece, because at the moment, on the whole, there are a very narrow range of numbers that a government or a chancellor is trying to maximize, with the belief and the assumption that if these numbers go up, society gets better. But there's a lot of evidence that the numbers they're trying to maximize are not the best ones for improving society, and people know it. So there's a whole rabbit hole there.
All right.
Let me end with one suggestion to you for something to think about, and maybe one for our listeners, because we always try to leave people with something to do. If in doubt, what am I really trying to maximize? because we do get confused and we do get pulled into these different rabbit holes. And one is a more money-centered rabbit hole, or an old habitual psychological pattern rabbit hole. Anytime I go, well, what the hell am I trying to do? Go back to the spark or the impulse behind the whole idea. And this is also Peter Koenig's work, who created the money work. And what I think you said was something like, with the voucher, it's Naz's birthday and I wanted to do something really nice or special
Yeah.
for her. Something like
Yeah.
that.
That's
So
exactly.
if you hear that statement and maybe come into your body again,
Mm.
maybe in your heart or somewhere, there's something very pure and simple. I want to do something really nice for my wife for her birthday. So whatever's there might be a feeling or a phrase or a little vision. Why don't you maximize that and not worry quite so much about the numbers, and see how that works when you're booking, when you're planning?
Yeah, it's so true. It's totally opposite what I'm trying to maximize, and maybe what I'm trying to maximize for her, or what she might even value in terms of maximizing. It's the experience, it's being together. That's the aim of it, which is totally different to what I'm trying to do
But
booking.
I think when you started, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think in that first moment of going, "Oh, I've got a voucher, I'm gonna go and
Yeah,
book something," I think in that first moment, you're like, "Well, we can have a lovely
yeah,
time."
absolutely. That's how it started.
So the
100%.
founding movement, the creative impulse, is a life-centered impulse. But because of your psychology and your old habits, as with all of us,
Yeah,
we often have these first movements are very much more about an excitement or a creativity or a passion or ooh, an interest. And then because the world has trained us to do it, we often squash that and we focus on the numbers. And maybe a question for our listeners just to think about: if you connect with your body and your heart and your soul, what is it really in life, in your life and in life, in the world, you really would love to maximize, to grow, to have amplify in the world? It's a big question,
mm,
but it's a good one. And when you spend time with that and spend time with that first, the second question is, how does the way in which you deal with money support that thing to grow and amplify in the world? Or to what extent does the way you deal with money stop or prevent or delay that thing growing? Because I believe, and in the spirit of this work, actually we are all trying to grow or amplify or maximize something. It's just not really a number. In reality, we just get caught up. What do you think?
I think that's great. Food for thought, reflection for me, reflection for the listeners, and yeah, looking forward to part 2 of this.
Great. Me too. I think there's a part 2 and a part 3. So
See you
see
later,
you next.
Tim.
Have a good week. Bye.